All right, so today we're going to be diving into some pretty fascinating history.
Oh, I love this stuff.
We're going to be focusing on the late Roman Empire and specifically Emperor Theodosius the And really, I know you're interested in what we can learn about keeping our own faith strong in modern times
Right.
by looking at his struggles against paganism in the late Roman Empire.
It's fascinating, yeah.
So we've got some great historical accounts and some letters to help us kind of unpack this.
Okay.
So let's jump right in.
Let's do it.
Now, Theodosius is really interesting because he wasn't just an emperor. He saw himself as a defender of the Christian faith,
Right.
battling against all the pagan beliefs and practices that were still kind of hanging around in Roman society.
Yeah, the remnants of it, exactly.
So to really get a handle on his fight, though, we need to kind of rewind a bit back to Constantine the Great
Okay.
and his conversion to Christianity in 312 AD.
Right.
I mean, that story about his vision of the cross before the Battle of Milvian Bridge.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
It's an amazing story.
Seeing that flaming cross in the sky, the words, "In this sign, conquer."
Yeah.
I mean, he wins the battle, attributes it to the Christian God.
Right.
And this sets the stage for the whole rise of Christianity within the Roman Empire.
But even with Constantine's backing, this transition from paganism to Christianity wasn't an easy one, right?
No, it was a really complex and tumultuous period.
And what I think is really interesting is that Constantine didn't just kind of embrace it personally.
Yeah,
He actively promoted it throughout the empire.
that's right.
We see all this construction of churches, the closure of some pagan temples, and even the destruction of a few.
Yes, it was a pretty clear message that things were changing.
So with all of this, did paganism just disappear?
Not at all. It's actually more complicated than that.
Oh,
You see, even as Christianity was gaining this imperial favor, paganism wasn't just going to vanish overnight. It went underground, in a way, and continued to be practiced, sometimes openly, sometimes secretly.
so it was still there lurking in the background.
Very much so.
And this is where Theodosius enters the picture.
Yeah.
He inherits this, I guess you could call it, this messy religious landscape. Right?
Exactly, and he becomes emperor in 379 AD.
Okay, and he was a very devout Christian.
Oh, absolutely, a staunch defender of what was known as the Nicene Creed.
Right, the definition of Christian orthodoxy.
Exactly.
So on one hand, you've got these internal theological debates within Christianity, and on the other hand, you've got the presence of paganism still kind of hanging around.
Yes.
So how did Theodosius approach all of this?
Well, he was definitely not passive.
Oh, right.
He didn't just issue decrees and hope for the best. He took a much more proactive, almost aggressive approach to really dismantling those structures of paganism.
What kind of things did he do?
Well, we see these edicts that outlawed pagan rituals and sacrifices, the closing down and destruction of temples, and even the punishment of those who persisted in practicing the old ways.
So he was really serious about this.
He absolutely was.
Are there any specific examples of his actions that really illustrate this approach?
There's a pretty striking one.
Okay.
The destruction of the Serapeum in Alexandria in 391 AD.
The Serapeum, what was that?
It was a grand temple complex dedicated to the god Serapis, who was this kind of fusion of Greek and Egyptian deities.
Oh, wow.
It was a major symbol of pagan religious authority.
I can imagine.
And its destruction really sent shockwaves throughout the empire.
So how did the pagan community react to all of this? I mean, destroying such a prominent temple.
There was a lot of resistance.
Yeah.
I mean, the destruction led to riots and unrest, especially in Alexandria. It shows just how deeply ingrained those pagan beliefs still were.
Right.
But Theodosius held firm.
Okay.
He saw this eradication of paganism as absolutely essential for the spiritual well-being of the empire.
So it was a clash of worldviews.
Yes, a clash of civilizations, really.
Yeah, and it's a reminder that religious transitions are rarely peaceful or easy.
Absolutely. Transitions like this, they always involve some degree of conflict and upheaval.
And what's fascinating is that when they were demolishing the Serapeum, they discovered these stones engraved with hieroglyphs that look like crosses.
That's right.
Really?
Yes, they were shaped like the Christian cross.
Wow, and how did people interpret that?
Well, it fueled a lot of debate.
I bet.
Christians saw it as proof that the cross had this universal significance, even in ancient Egypt.
Right.
But pagans countered by saying the symbol had a variety of meanings, and it wasn't unique to Christianity.
Right.
But some former pagans who had converted to Christianity claimed they could actually decipher the hieroglyphs.
Oh, wow.
And they insisted the cross symbol meant life to come.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was a powerful argument for them.
So Theodosius dismantles this major pagan temple. But is this the end of paganism?
Not quite. It would be oversimplifying things to say that he just wiped it out completely.
Okay.
It was a significant blow, yes. But pockets of pagan belief and practice, they persisted.
So Theodosius's struggle wasn't an isolated event.
No, not at all.
It was part of a much larger ongoing tension between Christianity and paganism.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder about the lasting impact of all of this.
You're right, and it raises some really interesting questions for us today, especially in light of your interest in spiritual vigilance. Think about, for example, the revival of the Olympic Games in 1896 in Athens.
Right in the heart of ancient Greece.
Exactly.
Now, of course, we see the Olympics as a secular event.
Right.
But its roots are undeniably pagan.
You're absolutely right, originating in the worship of Zeus and all those other Greek gods.
So we're seeing those elements that Theodosius fought so hard to suppress.
Yeah.
Kind of finding their way back into our modern world.
In various forms, yes, and it really forces us to consider how those things might be, subtly influencing us in ways we don't even realize.
It's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and think about it. Like even today, we have this emphasis on physical prowess, competition in the Olympics.
Right.
Halloween, it has its roots in pagan festivals.
Oh, that's true.
Even something like yoga, which is so popular now. It came from a tradition that was totally different from Christianity.
Right.
It's these little things that point to, a resurgence of those values and practices that Theodosius was fighting against.
So if Theodosius were here today, what do you think he would be most concerned about? Like, what parallels do you think he'd see between the paganism he fought against and the challenges to faith that we face in the modern world?
That's a really great question. And I think it's a question we should all be asking ourselves, Like, while Theodosius might not recognize the specific forms these challenges take today, I think he would definitely recognize the underlying spirit. Like he might point to the materialism we see all around us, which overshadows spiritual values.
Right.
The focus on individual achievement over, the common good, the constant pursuit of pleasure and comfort at the expense of, discipline and sacrifice.
So it's almost like the things he was trying to stamp out have just found new ways to kind of sneak back in.
Exactly. They've adapted and taken on new forms, but the underlying spirit is still there.
It's really fascinating.
And that word you used earlier, vigilance, that's really key here.
What do you mean?
Well, what does spiritual vigilance look like in a world where all these things Theodosius fought against are, coming back in different ways?
That's a tough one.
It is, and I think it requires us to be really discerning. We have to carefully examine those values and influences that surround us all the time.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that even things that seem harmless or even beneficial can actually, if we're not careful, kind of erode our faith or distract us from our spiritual goals.
So it's not about rejecting everything that has roots outside of Christianity.
Yeah, not at all.
But being more aware.
It's about being mindful, aware, and making those choices that align with what we believe.
Conscious choices.
Exactly.
So I guess for Theodosius, it was about asking, does this practice, this belief, this activity bring me closer to God or pull me further away?
That's the question. And, Theodosius in his time, he was fiercely committed to defending his faith. His actions might seem extreme to us now, but the principle behind it, this idea of protecting faith from what he saw as harmful influences, that's something we can learn from.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's about being vigilant guardians of our own hearts and minds, constantly on guard against those subtle ways our faith can be undermined.
It's an ongoing battle.
It really is a battle for our attention, for our hearts.
The world's pull versus, that call to a life of faith.
Exactly. That tension is always there.
And in a way, Theodosius' story shows us that this battle isn't new.
That's so true.
It's been going on for centuries.
And we all have to face it in our own lives. Yeah, it really is a battle for our souls, I guess you could say.
And his story reminds us that, faith isn't just something we inherit or take for granted.
Right.
It's something that we have to actively, cultivate,
Mm-hmm.
defend, and live out in the real world, even when it's tough.
Absolutely. And, Theodosius, despite his flaws, he gives us this example of someone who took his faith seriously.
Yeah.
And he was willing to fight for what he believed in.
Yeah. And it makes you think about all the subtle ways our faith can be undermined today.
Oh, absolutely.
The things we're exposed to, the messages we hear.
It's a constant bombardment, isn't it?
It really is.
And I think that's where that idea of discernment comes in.
Right. Being able to recognize those influences and make conscious choices.
Exactly. And Theodosius, in his own way, was trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He was trying to protect the faith from what he saw as harmful influences.
And it's interesting because his methods might seem extreme to us now.
Oh, for sure.
But the underlying principle is still relevant.
Absolutely. It's about safeguarding our beliefs, being vigilant.
Yeah, I see that.
It's like he's saying, hey, pay attention, be aware of what's going on around you, because it can affect your faith.
So it's not about building walls or shutting ourselves off from the world.
No, not at all.
But engaging with it in a mindful way.
Exactly. Being in the world, but not of the world, as they say.
Right, yeah.
It's a delicate balance.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It really has.
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We've gone deep, that's for sure.
And I'm so grateful for your insights.
The pleasure was all mine. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, I think it's time to wrap things up. But before we do, let's leave our listener with a final thought to ponder.
I like that.
What do you think Theodosius would say to us today about the role of faith in our modern world?
Oh, that's a good one.
What lessons from his life and his struggles might be applicable to our own lives?
Yeah, that's something to really reflect on.
It is, and I think it's a fitting way to end our deep dive into the life and times of Emperor Theodosius.
I agree. And who knows, maybe his story will inspire some of our listeners to go and learn even more.
I hope so.
It's a fascinating period of history, full of intrigue and lessons for us today.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the past.
Take care.